Jean Bécu, Countess du Berry, was the last maîtresse en titre of Ancien Régime France, occupying the semi-official position from 1769 to 1774. This was a position that, quote, gave her privileges and powers of which she may not have been aware, end quote. In addition to political influence, she amassed a significant portion of capital in the form of jewelry and chateaux. This particular set of circumstances created a unique situation for Madame du Barry, one in which she became entangled in the unpredictable current of the French Revolution. This microhistorical investigation will focus on 4 voyages that Madame du Barry took between Paris and London from 1791 to 1793. These trips provide a moment in the French Revolution exceptionally ripe for questioning the intersections of class, gender, and agency. I will approach my investigation of du Barry following the methodology of Natalie Zeman Davis in Trickster Travels. Her goal is to, quote, explore how a man moved between different polities, made use of different cultural resources, and entangled or separated them so as to survive, discover, write, make relationships, and think about society and himself, end quote. Thus, this paper will address du Barry's various forms of power manipulation within the differing pockets of power created during the Old Regime, the Early Revolution, and the Terror. Jean Bécu was born 19 August 1743 as the illegitimate daughter of Frère Ange and Anne Bécu. In 1749, at age 6, Jean relocated to Saint-Ouen, a youth convent where she spent 9 years. After this education, Jean took the name Mademoiselle Lange and worked as a demoiselle de compagnie for Madame de la Garde. Eventually, she gained employment that propelled her to a life in the French court. Jean found work at the Parc aux Cerfs, which was an apartment close to Versailles that served as a private brothel for the men of the French aristocracy. During her stint at the Parc aux Cerfs, Louis XV's valet Lebel noticed her as a potential lover for the king. It was also here where John du Barry, a conniving lawyer, hoped to gain access to the royal court. This attorney, as part of his plot, suggested that Jean marry his brother, Guillaume, the Count du Barry. Interestingly, a new version of her birth certificate was fabricated so that Gaumard de Vaubernier was listed as her legal, legitimate father. Thus, Jean Bécu was now the Countess du Barry. However, she was not required to consummate her marriage as she was immediately granted a legal separation from the Count. Although she was forced to act within the structure and restrictions of the Ancien Regime apparatus for the entirety of her life, becoming a legally separated countess allowed her independence both as a woman and as a member of the aristocracy. After Louis XV's death, she retreated to her chateau at Lucienne, just west of Paris near Versailles. She disappeared from the main stage of Parisian court life and politics until the revolution approached the Terror. At this point in time, she staged a jewel theft. The jewels were later found in London, so that she would be given permission to cross the English Channel 4 times during the French Revolution. During these journeys, I suggest that she was moving her remaining possessions and fellow nobles out of France, all while establishing herself in the new French Court of Émigrés in London. Therefore, this paper is about du Barry's agency during her attempted emigration, with particular focus on the 4 voyages to London. Agency is defined as either the capacity for self-reflection in a constructed society or the capacity for independent action. These definitions show no indication of methods of restraint, of which the patriarchy is a prime example. For this essay, I find it more beneficial to think of agency as the above capacity for independent action, but located within isolated pockets of limited choice. This qualifier signifies choice in a situation of constraint. For example, Magnuson and Sijarto claim that microhistorians emphasize agency when, quote, instead of pointing out oppressive structures that cripple and kill people, they highlight how people build, maintain, erode, or eventually destroy structures, end quote. Thus, for this essay, agency represents the conscious choice of action in a pocket of power within an otherwise limiting construct. To elucidate this, I rely heavily on du Barry's interrogation by the Revolutionary Tribunal, her various French and English passports, and her letters to government officials and friends. Du Barry made her first trip to London overtly to regain her jewelry, on 4 February 1791 with a full retinue. For the second trip to London, she secured a passport on 3 April 1791 in Paris, signed by the Count de Montmorin, the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Again, she traveled with a full retinue. Jean returned to France on 21 May 1791. However, after only being in France for 48 hours, a courier arrived insisting on her urgent presence in London. She and her party left for London again on 23 May 1791 to make their third of 4 voyages. It seems that she only made this intermittent journey to France in order to claim that it was always her intention to return to France. Furthermore, she had left London so that upon her return, she could establish herself at a more prominent location and, quote, in order to make her third trip more enjoyable, Jean rented a house near Berkeley Square, employed domestics, and purchased a carriage and horses, end quote. Extravagant planning suggests that she intended to live in London indefinitely. However, this is where the story becomes unclear. For some reason, Du Barry returns to France without her jewelry and without any clear resolution or plan of action. The sources are scarce about this, and her numerous biographers fail to point to any sort of consensus. If the point of microhistory is to understand strangeness by contextualizing it, the question of motive around her third and fourth voyages creates this opening. During her fourth and final voyage, Du Barry arrived on 14 October 1792 with the Duchess de Brancas and the Chevalier de la Bondy. Upon reaching her residence on Burton Street, Pauline, the Duchess of Mortemar, joined her. In addition to her traveling companions, who were members of the French aristocracy, Jean visited numerous other French émigrés. As this trip sealed her fate as an émigré, curiosity surrounds the reason for her return. According to Stanley Loomis, it was not necessary for her to go to London a fourth time, as all of the official business could have been taken care of by an attorney. He suggests that she was there because she was in desperate need to come in contact with the Duchess of Mortemar, who, as the daughter of the Duke of Bresac, was able to ensure that Du Barry received the money that Bresac guaranteed her in his will. Returning to the documents themselves. For the first of her 3 journeys, Madame Du Barry acquired her passports from the municipality of Paris via the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Comte de Montmorin. For her 4th trip, her passport came only from Charles-François Lebrun via the municipality of Lucienne, as referred by the Department of Seine-et-Oise. In a letter from Lebrun to Jean on 21 September 1792, he informed her that her, quote, passports had just returned to him from the municipality, observed and perfectly in order, end quote. Du Barry, always prepared to cover her tracks, noticed a problem with her passports. She wrote to Lebrun on 2 October 1792, fearing that, quote, as it is not mentioned in either your letter or my passport of my trip to London, or my unfortunate trial requiring my presence, I fear experiencing difficulties on my journey, end quote. Madame Du Barry alluded to the possibility that she could have been considered an émigré, as well as the possibility of her goods, especially Lucienne, being sealed and seized by the revolutionary government. Furthermore, in this same letter, Du Barry expressed fear that the government, quote, could see her having emigrated and put then the seals on her residence, end quote. She knew that she was leaving France for an extended period of time on a passport that would not stand the scrutiny of the tribunal. She was indeed emigrating and attempting to disguise the fact. She had every reason to fear, but this fear did not stop her from leaving. Du Barry returned to France after her 4th voyage on 17 March 1793, after departing London on 1 March with an expired re-entry passport to France. For this, she was held in Calais until she received permission to continue from the officials in Paris. More importantly, this passport proved that she arrived back to France almost 6 months after the allotted time that she was given to stay in London. This is further evidence that she had in fact emigrated and had only returned to collect her possessions at Lucienne, which had been sealed by the committee during her stay in London. As remaining in London after France declared war on Great Britain would have only served as evidence against her, she had to present herself in order to counter claims of immigration and also to regain her property and possessions at Lucienne. Despite her overt claims, immediately upon returning to Lucienne, she began making plans with Nathaniel Parker Forth, a British spy, to transport the remainder of her possessions to London via Amsterdam. Throughout her various voyages to London, she took multiple precautions to ensure that she was not considered an émigré. The following is a letter Jean wrote to Ledoux, the minister of Lucienne, in 1792 before departing on her fourth voyage. She wrote this letter to affirm her status as a French citizen. Quote, "Since I have the honor to live under your watch, you have wanted, sir, to recognize that on all occasions I have given the wages of my civism and my respect for the law. I boast that by the same spirit of justice you would well receive the present declaration that I do not go to London at all to abandon my country and my regular residence, but that I am forced to take myself to London in order to finish there a trial from which depends the recovery of my precious effects, which you know were stolen from me, and which compose the principal part of my fortune, as well as the only collateral that my creditors have. I declare at the same time that I am taking the utmost caution to return to France as soon as my case is finished." End quote. While an attempt to preemptively counter the committee, this letter is evidence of her guilt. She took much precaution to hide the fact that she had emigrated. By putting forward such an effort to defend her citizenship status, she appeared guilty. She had hoped that by providing this statement prior to departing, she would be safe from any prosecution. Before the rise of Robespierre and the Terror, Jean must have thought, as did many other French nobles, that there would be a peaceful return to the ways of the Ancien Régime, or in the very least an agreeable accord. It is in this context that Dubarry writes to Lebrun, the president of the Directory of the Seine-et-Oise. In her letter, she refers to him as Monsieur multiple times, while using the formal form of the second person singular, vous, to address him in the customs of the Ancien Régime. While continuing with these customs when addressing others, she did begin to distance herself, ever so slightly, from the aristocracy. Despite referring to the recipient of the letter with all formality, she addresses herself simply as Dubarry, choosing to leave off the title Countess. Dubarry must have been cognizant of the changing linguistic protocol of the Revolution. Dubarry adopted the language of the Revolution, if only to attempt to save her life. When writing in March of 1793 to the administrators of the district of Versailles, she greeted them with citoyen administrateur. In the same letter, she called herself la citoyenne de Vaubernier du Barry. In an attempt to distance herself from the actions of other nobles, she says that she has been, quote, treated like an émigré, end quote, in order to suggest that she was not one. Similarly, in a November 1793 letter from Dubarry to Fouquier-Tinville, the public prosecutor, she opened by addressing him as citoyen accusateur public. The use of citoyen in place of monsieur shows that she was cognizant of the changing laws and social prescriptions on behavior, and that in this instance, she chose to conform. She adopted the language of the Revolution only because it was crucial to her survival, and this is an expression of her agency and attention to self-fashioning. The Law of Suspects, promulgated on 17 September 1793, ordered the arrest of each person who showed signs of loyalty to the Ancien Régime. It was after the French government enacted this law that George Grieve, a revolutionary investigator, was able to succeed in petitioning for her arrest. The committee issued the final arrest warrant for Madame Dubarry on 21 September 1793 with orders to take her to Paris to Saint-Pélagie, a former convent converted to a prison during the Revolution. With this warrant, she was arrested as a suspect of incivism and aristocracy. When Grieve arrived to take her into custody, Madame Dubarry, quote, ran up the stairs to the second floor, attempting to destroy and hide compromising papers, quote, in order to hinder Grieve's investigation. He annotated each of the letters that he found, and this formed the basis for the charges that he levied against her. At the time of the arrest, the seals were again affixed to Lucienne. Dubarry, at this moment, attempted to destroy any evidence that would suggest guilt or emigration. Madame Dubarry is perfect for a microhistorical investigation because of her exceptional normality as an historical figure and because of the corpus of documentation surrounding her life. Her varying moments of dependence and independence highlight the functional nuance around agency. Any instances of agency related directly or indirectly to the patriarchy, and her ability to operate therein was always preconditioned by masculine influence. This was the case with her brother-in-law, the king, her final lover, and the government officials with whom she interacted. Thus, Her experience not only peels away the narrative of noble immigration, it also dissects her place as a female noble, and one who gained nobility late in life and by controversial means. She even provides a window into the stoic nature of the nobility and a performative admission that perhaps she never assimilated into that world. Regarding Du Barry's death sentence and march to the guillotine, I close with Vigée Lebrun's thoughts. She is the only woman, among so many women that these ugly days have seen perish, who could not decisively bear the characteristics of the scaffold. She screamed. She begged for mercy from the atrocious madness that surrounded her, and this madness stirred her until the point that the blade hastened to stop the torture. This here has always persuaded me that if the victims of this time of abysmal memory had not the noble pride to die with courage, the terror would have ceased so much sooner.